hard work made up for the relatively short time. I had a responsibility. I had a job. I had a responsibility to the people of Toronto. I had an obligation to fulfill my responsibilities to them, and I did that. And upon completion of that, I entered into this race knowing that we were late starting, but that we would have to work very hard to catch up. And we did that work, and today I'm now the candidate.
That former Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair speaking after he won the federal Liberal nomination for the Ontario riding of Scarborough Southwest. For more on this story and other political headlines, we are joined by political consultant Michael Geoghegan. He's in Victoria, BC. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Your reaction to Bill Blair's win?
Well, it'll certainly be an interesting one. The Liberals need to pick up seats in the Toronto area. The Scarborough riding that he has the nomination in, there's an incumbent NDP MP. There were some polls that suggested that if he got the nomination, that he'd be well placed to knock off, I think it's Dan Harris. On the other hand, New Democrats are turning around and pointing to this nomination and saying, see, there isn't a big difference between the Liberals and Conservatives, and if you're unhappy with Bill C-51 and other things like that, we're the party to vote for. So the NDP are going to use it to spin it as to their advantage. Meanwhile, they could lose an MP to his candidacy.
Right. Prime Minister Stephen Harper, a very busy schedule abroad this week, including that meeting with the Pope at the Vatican. What did you think of that 10-minute meeting?
Yeah, it was only 10 minutes. I think Russia's Putin got an hour.
That's right.
But he spent most of that time talking about the situation in the Ukraine. He also said that he brought up the residential school issue. It's obviously, given the situation in the Ukraine, and given the fact there's 1.3 million Canadians who, consider themselves of Ukrainian ancestry, definitely an important issue for the Prime Minister to raise.
Yeah, and, the Prime Minister is back in Canada now. His Tories are trying to bring the niqab ban back. The ban was struck down in a federal court in February. What do you think of this renewed attempt and how it's going to look at this time?
Well, Quebec, of course, provincially has moved forward with this legislation. The Bloc Québécois had a little more ardent stand in terms of non-religious symbols in the public workplace. The Liberal Quebec government has dialed it back a bit. But when you're talking about the niqab and the burqa, I mean, outside of Saudi Arabia, no one really uses the niqab. And as for the burqa, well, outside of like the Taliban-controlled areas of Afghanistan, no one uses it. So in terms of, whether wearing a hijab or what have you, a scarf essentially over your head, I don't think the Conservatives would move in that area. They're just focusing on the two items, which again, outside of Saudi Arabia, even in the Muslim world, are not that widely used.
Yeah, another loss for the Conservatives at the Supreme Court of Canada. What was your reaction to the edible pot ruling?
Well, I always found it bizarre that if you're going to say that a patient needs medical marijuana, let's say it's for epilepsy or cancer, what have you, no, we're going to force you to only have it in dried form and where you can only smoke it. Whereas most, doctors, I think, would say, if you're going to have THC or what have you, or CBD oil or whatever it is you require, that there's perhaps safer ways of getting that, and edibles, as long as you can control the dosage, might be a safer way. So the fact that you had a unanimous Supreme Court ruling, again, that's a big slap to the Harper government. And I think it's one of those situations where, given what we've seen in the States, like especially in Colorado, I think the government's position is looking increasingly antiquated and out of touch with where Canadians are headed on this issue.
Right, okay. Political consultant Michael Geoghegan. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael.
Thank you.